The UTS Multicultural Women's Network was kind of established in 2019. Our aim is to amplify and support the experiences, the perspectives of multicultural women within the university. And we do that by representation, or advocating for representation and visibility across the university, as well as look for opportunities to support each other, as well as look at things like policy and how we can influence policy to better support women of colour.
I was very attracted to join the network because I didn't find any spaces really for women like me in tertiary education, and I find that this network is that place.
I think the reason that I was drawn to it as well is that sense of not only what we're doing externally but internally for us, right? You know, like having a community of, I think that's one of the things that can be really isolating in like many spaces, but in a university space as well, which predominantly is like white-led or, you know, like very can be difficult in that aspect. So we're kind of going through similar challenges, right? It's kind of that community.
I'm Professor Chris Kinane and I'm the head of the Indigenous Law and Justice Hub within Jumbana Research. We do a whole range of different things around criminal justice and other forms of civil and family law issues that affect Aboriginal people.
What I do as the president of the First Nations Society is be the forefront of each communication between us and Jumbana. We're in the process of becoming a sponsorship with them, so they will sponsor us, and then hopefully in the future they'll look after the academic side of things and we'll look after more the social side of things. We've moved into being a society because we wanted to be more social than political. That was the role of that. I think it's pretty important. The students that are from outside of Sydney that really need like that sense of community, and the whole point or the vision of the society is to, you know, be an autonomous group where we can discuss our ideas and have that sense of community. But if we do want to be political on some occasions, then we can advocate to that.
So the Ethnocultural Collective was founded to create a space for Black, Indigenous and people of colour, of ethnic minorities, to come together and have resources and events available to them that cater to that part of their identity and experience with identity. It turned out to become a very practical space for anti-racism and anti-racism activism and campaigning. However, it's also being used in a much more intimate way in terms of allowing people from those ethnic backgrounds to have access to resources that help them understand what they're going through, and also have a community space in which they can speak to other people who have similar issues or concerns.
We do have different parts of the university coming to us for strategic advice. That's looked like perhaps running a workshop or supporting events that they have. So for example, with the Women in Engineering and IT, they have regular coffee catch-ups too. So we've been supportive of that, and they've been supportive of our own coffee catch-ups within the network. And we've also run events in the past that all have to do with the concerns that we have. So race, gender, ability, disability, all the intersections and how they play and how they impact on our lives. We've also partnered with small organizations, grassroots organizations like Afghan Women on the Move. And what we try to do is to be a support in a time that's most needed.
Call It Out is one piece of the work that we're doing at the moment, and it's a racism registry. The reason we've set up the registry is that there's no ongoing collection of information around the racism experienced by First Nations people in Australia. So what we decided to do was to set up an online registry for First Nations people who experience racism, and they can record, or other people who may have observed what had happened or is happening can record incidents of racism on this registry.
My goal in particular is to make sure that we focus more on us, you know, being connected with one another, especially with other students. And I think it's really important because there are other students in other faculties that probably don't know about Jumbana, that probably don't know about the First Nations Society. And if we can, you know, physically be there and make us known, I think maybe they can feel a bit more connected.
One of the biggest issues that we really wanted to hone in on this year was safe spaces on campus, physical safe spaces. And as part of that safe space campaign, we created beyond like a 3-point action plan to go throughout the year to create negotiations to get started on this safe space.
It's a network set up by women of colour for women of colour. It's really critical that if we're wanting to, see some change, that we take some responsibility with that as well, and push the envelope and advocate and agitate in the spaces that we know need some major changes. It's really critical that it's driven by us, but in partnership with allies.
Yeah.
It's about elevating the voices that don't usually get heard.
We know that First Nations people experience racism at a very high rate, and we know that because of occasional surveys that have been done. The figures that come back from that indicate that around 30 to 50% of First Nations adults report having experienced racism in the recent past. We've got no way of knowing in an ongoing way what the level of racism is that's experienced by First Nations people. As a result of that, what we did was set up this online registry, which we see as an ongoing vehicle to measure the nature and the incidence of racism against First Nations people. We have a national agreement on closing the gap, which was signed 2 years ago by the peak Aboriginal bodies throughout Australia and all governments across Australia, both federal, state and territory. One of the targets of that national agreement, is to reduce the level of racism experienced by First Nations people. You could immediately start scratching your head and think, well, how are they going to know if that's occurring? Because there's actually no way of measuring the incidence or any reduction in the incidence. So again, this was part of the reason for setting up the Call It Out registry.
It's really good to have. It really does make you feel a bit more connected, especially to students that do live away from their home.
There is a concern of racism on campus. The language of race is a privilege, and being able to articulate the experiences you're having is a privilege, and I wasn't actually granted that language until university. So that space was put forward as an idea to create resources for students to be able to come and gain that knowledge to deal with what they're dealing with in their lives.
We operate off the, in addition to our day jobs. And so, I think that is a huge barrier. I mean, dominant narratives aside, to be seen as a legitimate organisation within the university, it needs funding. It needs to be taken seriously by the university, and I think that's at present the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I definitely second that. We're not a part of anything officially, we're our own entity, which is also great because we can work independently, but at the same time working independently means what resources do we have? What can we do with limited resources? So it's really the generosity from different partners that has enabled us to action some of the things that we want as well. But since we don't have that legitimate institutionalized function or place, I suppose, then that's a real blockage. Yeah.
It's funding, it's policy, but I think it's also just a larger recognition in terms of, you really can feel what the university prioritizes because, you see it around campus, or you just, it's in promotional material, it's in communications, and it's kind of, or it's spoken about in leadership meetings, or, there's a general sense of what the university prioritizes. And I think that we would love to see a greater recognition of that across kind of all aspects. And it's one thing to kind of say it and another thing to feel it, and I think that's something that we would love to feel.
Yeah, that's it.
We're doing it at the moment in the capacity, resourcing capacity that we've got. We don't have any particular funding for it at all, and that's a problem. But it's one that we hopefully will kind of resolve over the next 12 months or so, when people see how important the registry is and what the potential public policy impact of it is.
I feel like there are events where, you know, you celebrate International Day and stuff like that, where they have other societies and they bring their food. When it came around NAIDOC week and stuff like that, there was nothing really on campus that could, you know, pretty much advocate up for us and like our culture and stuff like that. So I think, you know, moving forward, it'd be good to have such events, and it'd just be good to give UTS that platform. From what I can see on my perspective, it's a matter of us taking the first step, but if we reach them there, like, they'll need to be constantly supporting us. I am the Indigenous representative for the FET faculty, so I go to the dean meetings and stuff like that, and then they try to ask for a student perspective on how to, you know, enroll more Indigenous students and stuff like that. I think if they're going to have stuff like that, and if that's a big indicator of what, or like one of their goals that they want to achieve as a university as a whole, I think they should support other things that go along with it, not like enrolling Indigenous students and then having no actual support or network there.
We didn't get a safe space, and we were told one of the reasons was because there wasn't any physical space on campus. And then the second part was that UTS already has initiatives available for anti-racism, and that this should be a safe space for everyone. Obviously, we felt that that kind of response invalidates the concerns of students of colour on campus. You know, it's important to highlight this university does not stand for racism. We're very anti-racism, have no tolerance. Fantastic, it's great to put that message out there. But if you have, once these students are attracted to your university because of that reason, you need to have things in place for those students to be supported during their time here, and to actually see that come to life beyond the images and the posters. And that's the hard part.